What would you do if a king ordered an innocent man to die, and the entire kingdom stayed silent? Imagine standing in a crowded royal square. Soldiers surrounding a helpless man, the executioner ready to strike. Thousands of people watching, yet not a single person daring to speak, because in this kingdom, questioning the king meant death. But on that day, something unbelievable happened. Not a warrior, not a noble, not a powerful lord. The one person who stopped the execution was just a child, and what that child said would shake the entire kingdom forever. Long ago, there was a powerful kingdom ruled by King Alaric. From the outside, the kingdom looked magnificent. Tall golden towers touched the sky. Markets were full of life, and the royal palace glittered like a jewel in the sun. Travelers who passed through the gates often believed it was one of the most prosperous places in the world. But behind the beauty, the people lived in fear. King Alaric was known across distant lands as a ruler who believed that power must never be questioned. To him, obedience was the foundation of a strong kingdom. If someone disobeyed him, punishment came quickly, and often it came without mercy. Merchants whispered about it in the marketplace. Farmers spoke of it quietly in the fields. Parents warned their children never to question the king's word, because in this kingdom, the king's command was law, even when it was wrong. And slowly, something dangerous began to grow among the people. Not rebellion, not anger, silence. On the edge of the city lived a poor man named Tomas. Tomas owned nothing except a small wooden house and the strength of his hands. Every morning before the sun rose, he walked to the busy market square where merchants needed help unloading wagons, carrying sacks of grain, and moving heavy crates. The work was exhausting. But Tomas never complained, because every coin he earned meant food for the one person he loved most in the world. His daughter. Her name was Lila. Lila was only 10 years old, but she had the brightest smile in the entire village. Their house was simple and their meals were small, but laughter often filled their little home. Every evening when Tomas returned from the marketplace, Lila would run to the door. "Father," she would shout, throwing her arms around him. Tomas would laugh, lifting her into the air. Despite his tired muscles, "Did you have a good day?" she would ask. And Tomas always answered the same way. "Any day I return to you is a good day." For them, happiness didn't come from gold or power. It came from each other. But fate can change a life in a single moment. One morning, chaos erupted inside the royal palace. Servants ran through the halls in panic. Guards searched every room. The king's most precious treasure had disappeared. It was a golden ring, ancient and priceless, said to symbolize the power of the crown itself. For generations, kings had worn it during ceremonies as a sign of their authority. And now, it was gone. When King Alaric heard the news, his anger shook the entire palace. He demanded answers. Guards questioned every servant, every guard, every noble who had been inside the palace walls. But no one could find the ring. And the king's patience vanished. "Find the thief," he ordered, his voice echoing through the throne room, "and bring them to me before sunset." The guards rushed into the city searching for anyone suspicious. Hours later, in the crowded marketplace, they saw Tomas walking past the palace walls, carrying a sack of grain. A nobleman pointed at him. "I saw that man near the palace last night," he claimed. The guards didn't accost in Italiano. To them, a poor man near the palace was reason enough. They surrounded Tomas immediately. "What's happening?" Tomas asked, confused, but they didn't answer. They grabbed his arms and dragged him through the streets. People watched in silence as the guards pulled him away. Tomas tried to explain. "I was delivering grain to the palace kitchens," he said desperately. But the guards ignored him. Within hours, the news reached the king. A poor laborer had been caught near the palace. That was enough for King Alaric. He didn't ask for proof. He didn't ask for witnesses. He made his decision instantly. The punishment for stealing royal treasure, the king declared, is death. The entire kingdom heard the news by morning. The execution would take place at sunrise in the royal square. When dawn arrived, The city gathered in the large stone plaza. Thousands of people stood shoulder to shoulder. Soldiers surrounded a wooden platform at the center. On that platform stood Tomas, his hands bound in heavy chains. His clothes were torn from the night in prison, but the fear in his eyes wasn't for himself. It was for Lila. He knew his daughter would wake up and find him gone. He knew she would come looking for him, and he knew she would be alone. The executioner stepped forward slowly. In his hands was a massive sword that gleamed under the morning sun. The crowd remained silent. Everyone knew the truth, but no one dared challenge the king. Above the square, on a balcony of the palace, King Alaric sat watching. To steal from the crown, the king announced loudly, is to betray the kingdom. His voice echoed across the square, and betrayal must be punished. The executioner raised the sword. Tomas closed his eyes. The crowd held its breath, but just before the blade could fall, a small voice suddenly shouted from the crowd, "Stop!" The word echoed through the square. Everyone turned. A little girl pushed through the crowd, forcing her way between shocked villagers and confused soldiers. Her clothes were worn and dusty from running, but her eyes burned with determination. It was Lila. She ran toward the platform. "That's my father," she cried. Gasps spread through the crowd. No one expected a child to appear like this. Soldiers tried to stop her, but she slipped past them and stood in the center of the square. On the balcony, King Alaric frowned. "Who dares interrupt royal justice?" he demanded. Lila looked up at him. Her hands trembled, but her voice did not. "Do." The entire crowd froze. Even the executioner lowered his sword in shock. No one spoke to the king that way, especially not a child. The king leaned forward, studying her. "You dare challenge my order?" he asked coldly. Lila took a deep breath. "If the king's justice is truly fair," she said, "then it should not fear one question." Murmurs spread through the crowd. The king narrowed his eyes. "What question?" Lila pointed toward her father standing in chains. "Where is the proof that he stole the ring?" The square fell, completely silent. The question hung in the air like thunder before a storm. No one had dared ask it, because everyone already knew the answer. There was no proof, only suspicion. But hearing the truth spoken aloud changed everything. Lila continued, her voice growing stronger. "My father works every day in the market," she said. "He carries sacks of grain until his hands bleed." She turned toward the crowd. "Many of you know him." Her eyes searched the faces around her. "Has he ever stolen from anyone?" For a moment, no one spoke. Then a man stepped forward. "He helped me carry my goods last winter," he said. Another voice followed. "He once returned coins I dropped in the street." Soon more voices joined. "He's an honest man. He's always helped people." The whispers grew louder. The crowd was no longer silent. King Alaric felt something shift in the air. For the first time in years, the people were thinking instead of obeying. Then suddenly, an old palace servant stepped forward from the crowd. He looked terrified. "Your Majesty," he said, bowing deeply, "I must confess something." The crowd turned toward him. The servant's voice shook. "I saw the ring last night in the chamber of Lord Cedri." The name spread through the crowd like fire. Lord Cedri was one of the richest nobles in the kingdom, a man who often stood beside the king himself. Soldiers rushed to search his chambers. The square waited in tense silence. Minutes later, the guards returned. In their hands was the golden ring. Gasps erupted everywhere. The truth was undeniable. Lord Cedric had stolen the ring and blamed a poor man, believing no one would question it. On the balcony, King Alaric sat frozen. An innocent man had nearly died because he refused to question an accusation, because he believed his authority was more important than truth. Slowly, the king stood. "Release him," he said quietly. The guards removed the chains from Tomas. Before anyone could say another word, Lila ran onto the platform and threw her arms around her father. Tomas held her tightly, unable to speak. The crowd erupted into cheers. But the king raised his hand again. The square slowly fell silent. He looked down at the little girl standing beside her father. "This child," the king said, "has shown more courage than anyone in my court." He paused for a moment, and more wisdom than our king. From that day forward, the kingdom would never be the same. And if this story moved you, take a moment to support the video. Like the video, share it with your friends, and write in the comments what you would have done if you were standing in that crowd. And if you enjoy powerful stories like this, make sure to subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next story.